What's up, everyone? It's Brian from SEC Cybersecurity 19. Welcome to another video. Today we're going to get into a talk about the SEC cybersecurity rules that are going to go into effect and affect a lot of businesses here in the US. I did a video on this back in the end of July in 2023, and we're going to link to that probably somewhere around here. You can click on it, you can check out that video, and that talks about these SEC rules in more detail. But we're starting to see the effects of that, and I'm going to talk about that in relation to the Clorox hack that just happened, which I did a video on. You can check that out somewhere around here. Check all these videos out that I've done around this, and you'll start to piece this stuff together. But today's video, I'm going to piece it together for you and show you how this rule, which hasn't even gone into effect yet, it doesn't go into effect until December, and what we're seeing companies start to do about this and some ramifications for some C-suite executives that you're going to want to stay tuned to and learn what's happening out there as I bring you these updates around cybersecurity and how it's impacting businesses a lot across the US. But first things first, guys, remember to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We appreciate the support. Drop your comments below if you have any questions, if you have anything you want to share around this stuff. We'd love to hear from you. On top of that, remember, we're doing our Small Business Tech Day event. I have Robert Herzerbeck, Mike McAlwitz, and quite a few other people coming in to speak to you and teach you how to use technology in your business better than you are today. It's a not to miss event. I look forward to seeing you there. There's more information on the event in the description, and it's completely free, so please sign up. The SEC cybersecurity rules, it doesn't go in effect until December, and we're already starting to see the rules impact on business and how they respond to cyber events. It's really starting to open up conversation of how much CISOs and legal counsel should be involved in the C-suite, and CFOs are really starting to take the heat for a lot of these decisions around cybersecurity for companies today. I'm going to illustrate this to you by talking about the Clorox breach yet again. They're actually still dealing with the attacks almost well into a month into it, and we're starting to learn a lot more through what's known as these 8K filings that these companies now have to do when they have a cyber event, and they have to detail a lot of things about these events, and we can learn a lot about these cyber attacks from these companies a lot sooner than we have been in the past. And I talk about this a lot on the channel and on my podcast, Security Squawk. When cyber attacks first started happening, ransomware started happening to the extent that it is today, I would say 4 or 5 years ago is probably the timeline of where we saw ransomware attacks starting to hit businesses, and the amounts of money started to increase dramatically into the millions. Many people to blame the rise of Bitcoin on this, but as you can see, Bitcoin has been where it's at for almost the whole entire year of 2023, and ransomware events are still increasing, and ransomware amounts that these cyber criminals are asking for are still increasing. So I don't really think it has much, as I said back then, to do with the rise of crypto. It was just a vehicle for them to get paid. They'll figure out other ways to get paid if you try to take away the crypto. That's besides the point. That's a video for another day. So what are we learning from these 8K filings, and what do we learn from Clorox? What are these 8K filings telling us is happening with these cyber events? So back in August 14th of 2023 is when Clorox initially filed an 8K filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they were notifying financial regulators that it experienced a cyber incident that had disrupted the company's business operation. That was 15 days after I did a video on the SEC rules, which was pretty amazing. A month later, the company filed another 8K filing, so in September, saying that the damage to its IT infrastructure from what it characterized as unauthorized activity was still wreaking havoc on its production systems, causing processing delays and an elevated level of product outages, all which would have material effect on quarterly financials. This is the main reason why they have to file this 8K. The company said it would produce an updated financial impact of the incident once it had increased visibility. Wow, because that word right there, once it has visibility, that could mean a lot because they may not get the visibility that they really need, depending on how prepared they were, for a very, very, very long time. It could be months, it could be even years or year and a half, 2 years before they really know the full impact of this event. But the interesting thing with this whole event with Clorox, to me anyway, is the fact that they decided to basically follow the SEC's guidelines that don't go in effect until December 18th of 2023. And they decided to follow them almost to the T through this event, even though these rules haven't gone into effect yet. And we're going to talk about kind of what Clorox did to adhere to these rules and kind of follow what the SEC has been basically telling these regulated businesses that they're going to need to do moving forward starting on December 18, 2023. So the first thing that companies are going to have to do starting in December 18th of 2023 is they have to disclose within 4 days any cybersecurity incident they determine to be material and describe the material aspects of the incident's nature, scope, and timing, as well as material impact or reasonably likely material impact on the registry. The other thing the rule stipulates is that they have to describe their processes for identifying and managing material risks from cybersecurity threats, as well as the material effects or reasonably likely material effects of risks from cybersecurity threats and previous cybersecurity incidents. The rule also says that they have to describe the board of directors' oversight risks from cybersecurity threats and management's role and expertise in assessing and managing material risks from cybersecurity threats. So even though these rules don't kick in until December, Clorox, the incident highlights the fact that there's a new sense of urgency by publicly traded companies to make sure that they do this stuff according to how the SEC has laid it out for good reason. They don't want to get scrutinized and have their regulators breathing down their neck as they're going through this event, nor do they want that to continue in the future, because this is the type of thing that if this happens to you, you're probably going to have regulators assigned to you on a regular basis to make sure you're not going to get hacked again. So in Clorox's case, they looked at the SEC rule and they decided to file swiftly. And that's the piece of it that we know that they're adhering to or they're following. They're making multiple 8K filings and they're disclosing what happened as per the rule, which is something that has changed. It's a shift in how corporations are handling this, because before this rule went into effect and before these rules were laid out in front of these publicly traded companies, it was really up to them and their PR team and their legal counsel how they wanted to handle this. And that's no longer the case. And we're seeing that with the Clorox event. Also, not seeing with the Clorox event is the fact that Clorox hasn't really disclosed the financial damage that we have seen with this, unlike what we saw with MGM. MGM has quickly come out and said what their damage is, and I think the last report was about $100 million total that they think this is going to cost them. We're also not seeing that with Clorox in either public statements or when they file these 8Ks. And this is interesting because they have to file this information fairly quickly according to the SEC. But like I said at the beginning of the video, it might be a challenge for these businesses to actually understand what the financial impact is. Just as I referenced with MGM. MGM may not realize that the $100 million is severely underestimated from what they know today. They will learn things moving forward, as we always see with cyber events and businesses. And as we try to explain to them, these are the things you're going to see as you move through this. A lot of times they don't believe us until they actually come to that point in their incident response and their recovery process, that they're faced with these decisions that they're going to have to make. And a lot of times in the beginning, CEOs, business owners, they don't believe us when we tell them these things or tell them, like, you're going to have to start thinking about this. One of those things is paying the ransom. There's many business people that I run into when we're dealing with incident response who think that they're not going to pay the ransom. But when you lay out all the facts in front of them, paying the ransom a lot of times becomes the only option for these businesses. The other interesting thing that this brings up with this SEC rule is the fact that companies are going to have a really hard time coming up with these financial numbers in the time frame that the SEC wants to see them. Because at the end of the day, this is going to impact the stock price of these publicly traded companies. And they want this information revealed to the public as quickly as possible so decisions can be made before they have to report on their quarterly earnings and things like that. So there's a lot of moving parts to this that I think companies are going to be okay with on the PR side of things. But when we're talking about disclosing financial impacts, that's going to be a big challenge that these publicly traded companies are going to have to figure out here by the middle of December. So you see a company like Clorox who is filing these 8K quickly, which puts pressure on other publicly traded companies when they get hacked. Because at the end of the day, when the SEC looks around and says, well, these 25 companies were able to file in this time frame. Why couldn't you file in the same time frame, which is 4 days? So now companies are kind of put on notice that there's companies like Clorox out there who can meet the demands of this new SEC rule. So it's going to be harder for these companies to fight it, and it's going to be harder for companies to argue against fines and penalties when they do come. So you have the sense of urgency that these businesses are going to feel just based on what other publicly traded companies are doing. But you're also going to see the fact that the words like unreasonable delay, it's going to add a sense of urgency that CEOs, CFOs, and the people in the C-suite at these publicly traded companies and boards of directors, quite frankly, because this impacts you too, going to really heighten the sense of urgency around this stuff, probably in the middle of December when most companies wake up to it. We see Clorox already waking up to it, but not everybody's on board with this stuff yet. Not everybody's bought in. Not everybody thinks it's real. It's very real. So regulators fully understand that there's a wide gap between the language that CFOs, their boards of directors, their CEOs, and what CISOs and general counsel for a lot of these firms, there's a communication gap here that has to be brought together. All these individuals need to start learning how to speak the same language, which is a risk conversation. It's pretty simple. CFOs want to make it about dollars and cents. They don't want to talk risk yet. CISOs want to talk about risk, or they should be talking about risk. They shouldn't be talking about widgets and tools and MFA and things like that. It's not how you bring this conversation into the boardroom, which the SEC is requiring board members to understand this stuff and have qualified individuals to let them know what their risk is. And qualified individual, sure, is a subjective term, but the SEC is the one who gets to decide at the end of the day whether the person that you have advising your board on your cybersecurity risk is a person that is qualified to do that, not you. I would make sure that it's not a friend, not somebody who's not qualified, not somebody who knows IT. It should be a person with a cybersecurity certification or some kind of a college degree or equivalent in the cybersecurity, or somebody who's been in IT for a very long time and has been practicing security and has security certifications to back up what they know, or some other way to verify that they are and know what they're doing. That is what boards of directors of these companies are going to have to hire and understand, that they have to hear from this person at every quarterly meeting that they have, and a readout needs to be done by this person to that board. So the board is going to start to understand risk, and the CFOs need to start to understand risk and stop looking at IT as a budget item and as a number and as a percentage of total revenue. That is not how you solve your cybersecurity challenges, by saying, well, the standard is to pay 1 to 3% of our top line revenue to IT, and that's where we're going to stick to. If you're highly regulated, if you have more compliance needs than others, like the SEC regulation, you are going to have to spend more on this stuff than you're probably traditionally used to. So your 1 to 3% number needs to go out the window. And until you wrap your head around this, it's going to be difficult for you to come to the table and have that risk conversation if all you want to have is a dollars and cents conversation. So CISOs, not about tech, not about the tools. CFOs, not about the numbers, not about the percentages, not about the bottom line. It's about risk all around. Everybody has to understand what the risk is and then how you're going to handle and deal with that risk in your business. With these SEC rules, CFOs in the publicly traded world are starting to understand that they need to start having these business continuity plannings, these incident response conversations, to start to understand what the impact is on their business. That's how you're going to solve this challenge as a company. But this takes a major shift in how these CFOs, CEOs, and boards of directors think, because quite frankly, they've been keeping CISOs and general counsel who want to have this conversation at arm's length as long as they can now. And rules like this are in place to break that down, because regulators understand where the breakdown is, and they're saying you're going to have to start having these conversations in your company. At the end of the day, I've talked to CFOs firsthand, and I can tell you this: CFOs don't want an accurate and clear picture of their cybersecurity. They want to keep burying their heads in the sand so they can plead ignorance when a problem happens to their company. So even when CISOs want to be proactive and they want to do something like what's called a risk assessment, a lot of times the higher ups and the people making the decisions are looking at that going, no, we don't want that to happen, because then we're going to know what our actual risks are and we're going to have to do something about it. And right now we can basically claim ignorance and not have to report it. Well, that's over with these rules with the SEC. And if you think if this is only going to be something that publicly traded companies have to deal with, I have news for you. There's laws on the books, there's regulations all over the place. Look at your contracts you're signing with your customers. Look at your cyber insurance policy. See what it says. I guarantee you there is similar language in these documents that your business has probably already entered in agreements to, because I find them and I see them all the time when we run risk assessments on businesses. We look at their contracts, we look at their cyber insurance policies, we look at things that they've signed and agreed to, and there's cybersecurity language in those, and it stipulates a lot of the things that are said in the SEC rules. They have to be done by private businesses as well. In the corporate world, in the enterprise level, when you're talking about publicly traded companies, what I said earlier, it couldn't be more true than anything I've said in this video, which is there's really 3 components, and maybe even 4 in most of these entities, that need to start working together, start speaking the same language. If your technical person who can run a risk assessment is unable to discuss risk with you, find an outside company or find somebody who can. If your legal counsel can meet with your technical person to discuss what they found and how that translates the risk to the business from a legal standpoint, the legal counsel can have a conversation with the CFO. CFO can then take all that information, and the 3 of them can go as a unified front to the CEO and to the board, and these boards of directors can start making decisions around risk and understand better why they need to spend more money on cybersecurity so they don't end up like a company like Clorox, MGM, which both had major cyber events here in the 3rd quarter of 2023. That's all I really have for you folks, and I hope you learned a lot in this video. If you have, drop it in the comments below. Remember, we're going to provide tons of content like this at our Small Business Tech Day event, which there's a link in the description. You can sign up for. We'd love to have you there, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay safe.